Dan Sullivan earlier, all the nice things that you all say to me is going to make my head swell. As Joey mentioned, I'm a law professor. I appear here in an individual capacity. That's particularly important now that I'm running for office to draw that distinction, so I do so happily. I'm a trial attorney, an appellate attorney, a FOIA advocate, as Joey mentioned, the co-author of the current edition of the FOIA, what we colloquially call the FOIA Bible, the treatise of the Freedom of Information Act, and the author, the sole author of the next edition. And to be clear, with the explicit direction of my two co-authors, they both said to me, well, we've done it long enough. One is fully retired, the other one has moved out of state, and when they brought me on to be co-author, they were both out of state already and said, we'll transition with you, and then thereafter it's yours, so handle it. And I happily do so. So that book will be coming out, incidentally, from Lexis. So it's going to be national press now, and it will be available online through Lexis, as well as, of course, hard copy. Joey is mentioned in the book. I suspect I cite to at least one, if not more, Mike Masterson articles. I certainly cite to some laws written by Dan Sullivan, a real, true advocate for transparency. You know, let me just make this point more broadly. Joey made a very nice comment about me running for office and that I'm a man of the people. I like to think that's true. I'll tell you a short story in a moment about that. But before I get to that, let me mention Dan Sullivan. Dan Sullivan is a state senator. He doesn't have a polo shirt with the little emblem senator written on it. Why? Because he didn't run for office to get the fancy shirt, to get the title. He did it to do good. You might not agree with everything he does. You might. But he did it because he has the right sentiment at heart. I once worked in the IRS of all places, not doing tax law, I did ethics law, in fact. And I worked in an internal office, meaning it wasn't something that had a liaison to the public. We didn't interact with the public. And I got a phone call on my direct line, and it turns out it was a woman who had been forwarded to me. And she said, I was told you're the person to help me solve this tax problem. Well, I know already that's incorrect because I don't do tax law. I don't know tax law. I didn't know it then, and I don't know it now. But rather than saying, no, you just have the wrong number, I said, okay, well, I know I'm not the right person. Here's who I think is the right person. She gave me a little description of what she needed. Here's that person. I'm going to connect you to that person. Here's that person's number. And since you called me through the switchboard, here's my direct line. And if that person is not the right person, or that person doesn't get you to the right person, call me back, and we'll find out who is the right person. Why? Because I equally have a commitment to doing the right thing. And unfortunately, government bureaucracy doesn't operate that way. On the whole, there are notable exceptions, but on the whole, it doesn't operate that way. Government bureaucracy is like a living creature. What creature? Well, it's kind of like rats and cockroaches. Why? They like to breathe, they like to eat, that means be funded, and they don't like sunshine. They don't like light. Guess what the FOIA is? It's sunshine. So we have to continually shine the light on government to make them scurry, bring out those good government workers who are doing good in the first place, who welcome those phone calls, who welcome that light. Not everyone's bad. But when you hear a government actor, and I've heard it many times, say, we don't need this law, this new proposed law. Why? Because we would never do that. We would never act ill-motived. I'm going to tell you a story exactly about that issue. I've been working with the legislature for at least a decade now, I believe, on a variety of bills, mind you, gotten several of them passed, including Freedom of Information Act amendments, positive amendments. Equally so, fighting to beat back amendments that seek to restrict it, that seek to undermine it, that seek to turn the law into Swiss cheese, so it's inoperable. So there was, across this country, on all Freedom of Information Acts, there's a notion developed by courts, because it's not explicitly in the statute, but it is implicitly. And it's known as the catalyst theory. So it's a fancy name, but if you know anything about chemistry, a catalyst is when you drop a chemical in with two other chemicals, and it makes those two other chemicals react. And so, as you likely know, in the Freedom of Information Act, if you're successful, you can get attorney's fees. So what's it mean to be successful? Because that's all it asks for. It asks for actually not complete success, but substantial, significant. Statutes differ, but it's all the same notion. You need to have been the better of the two in terms of the litigants, in terms of how the outcome came. And if you were, you get attorney's fees. That's to incentivize attorneys to take the case and disincentivize government from putting up roadblocks to transparency. Well, I brought a case. Actually, I was the litigant and co-attorney on it with another attorney. And I brought a case. And the university system said, well, even though they got a bunch of records, which we did, they're not entitled to attorney's fees. Oh, wait, what? Why not? Well, they're not entitled to attorney's fees because they didn't get the records by winning a judgment given by the judge. Well, how did we get the records? Well, of course, they turned them over. We sued, they settled. It's funny how that works, isn't it, right? All of these bureaucrats are big talkers. They're like internet bullies, right? They make a lot of noise until they show up in court. So we sued, and they turned over documents. So they said, well, that could never be a win. Wait, so if we get all the documents we want, that's not a win? That's right, says the university. Why is that not a win? Well, because the judge didn't say you won. But if we get all the documents, that's still not a win? That's right, not a win. That was their argument. By the way, I heard them make that same claim. We would never try to do anything that abuses the FOIA. We would never try to act in a way that's inconsistent with transparency. So the courts across this country have already developed an answer to that question. It's called the catalyst theory. Courts have said, well, if the catalyst was the lawsuit for you getting the records, then you get attorney's fees. That's a win. And of course, it's a matter of logic in this as well. They said, well, there's no case in Arkansas on that. There's no case in Arkansas on that because nobody had ever had the temerity to make such a ridiculous argument. Right? Here's the thing. Courts don't have to give opinions if people aren't dumb enough to show up with ridiculous arguments. Until now. So, they made that argument. So Dan Sullivan got into this. Dan Sullivan said, we need to make a law. Dan and I sat down and we drafted that law. Oh, the story doesn't end there. The university showed up to the legislature on your dime, by the way. Who's paying for them? On your dime to lobby against the law. So this is what happens, by the way, with bureaucrats all the time. They show up, they're paid by the government, and they show up to lobby the legislature to have less oversight. And you're paying for it the whole time. That's some setup, ain't it? So they lobby against the law. They say, well, maybe there's a good idea here, but it ain't this law. This law passed, by the way. It was such a good law that sponsored by Dan Sullivan, a Republican, and it was co-sponsored by a Democrat. Because the thing about transparency is it's not right or left. It's right or wrong. And it's just right. So we got that law put into place. So they were all concerned, the university was, well, we want to make sure that the legislative history says that it's not retroactive. Because we're still going to fight this one. This one that we have in a proceeding. We're still fighting. We ain't never letting go like a dog with a bone. All right, we'll put that in legislative history, no problem. Law passes, I think unanimously, but I'm not sure. I mean, it sailed through. I don't know, a few months later, Joey and I litigated a case up in Northwest. And we asked for attorney's fees. How did we get the records? Because we sued, and they said, you mean exactly the same facts? That's right, exactly the same facts. So you got the records pursuant to the catalyst, right? Or as a catalyst. The lawsuit was a catalyst, so you want the attorney's fees pursuant to the catalyst deal. That's right. And we went to the judge, and we said, we'd like attorney's fees. He said, you got it. And it's clear that the old law already recognized the catalyst theory. So all that litigation and all that legislation, why? Because a big state agency that can throw around its weight, that has unlimited funds to litigate, because you're paying for it, decided to say that the law didn't say what it says. So we put it on the books. And so that law serves two purposes. One is, that was a trial court, we don't have to go on appeal. Right? I mean, we won, but the point is, they're not going to appeal that. Why? Because the law's on the books. So this saves the public all that extra litigation. And it sends a signal to every bureaucrat around the state. We're here, and we ain't going nowhere. And we're going to fight you. We're going to fight you every time you're anti-transparency. And that's what that act was, that behavior. That was anti-transparency, and we're pro-transparency. So that's a little story about how legislation comes about. Let me tell you about disclosure and discovery as well. I thought Mike did a wonderful job, Mike Masterson, talking about that in the cases that he's handled over 50 years of history. I mean, what a wonderful journalist that we have in this state. He was both an academic and a journalist. He was a head of, I think, the nation's largest journalism program at the Ohio State University. And he was a journalist for years and years, and now he's a columnist, which, as you likely know, is a journalist who gets to give you news and opinion at the same time. And the good thing about Mike Masterson is he doesn't lose focus. When there's an issue to be followed, he will follow and continue to follow. That's the kind of perseverance that we need in journalists, and that's the kind of perseverance we need in the public when it comes to the use of the phone. I had mentioned, and Joey had mentioned, maybe Mike did too, I don't remember, that I'm running for office. Well, my primary opponent works for a government agency. He's on the board or something, I forget what the title is, of a government agency called the Arkansas Economic Development Commission. I'm aware of that organization. I've never been a fan of the organization. That organization is the public version of the Chamber of Commerce. They take your tax dollars and they use it to advance private business. Not small business, big business. You think Walmart needs advancement? Walmart's great! And they do their job just fine without any public subsidy. But that's what the AEDC is. It's corporate welfare. So I said to myself, I use the FOIA. I know the FOIA. Let me make a FOIA request of the Arkansas Economic Development Commission and see what they've done in terms of giving money to a private lobbying group that is the Chamber of Commerce. Chamber of Commerce is a private lobbyist paid for by business. And they go out and they advertise for business and they do whatever they want. And they, of course, they lobby the legislature. You heard them lobby the legislature when the legislature wanted to enforce individual liberties, and the chamber, along with big business, said, no, our employees don't have individual liberties. They check those at the door even when they're not working. So I made that FOIA request. Let me tell you what I found, because this is the power of the FOIA. I got 58 pages back from the AEDC. They were very compliant, to their credit, by the way, with the FOIA. 58 pages, and I'm going to read to you just a few of them. Here's one. $5,000 check for membership to the Arkansas Economic Developers and Chamber Executives. It's a type of chamber. Private lobbying, $5,000 membership. $5,000 Mid-South basic course sponsorship and presenting sponsor. $25,000 annual membership. I'm going to show you this paper. And what does it say on top? Well, you can see it. Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce. Wow. $25,000 for 1 year annual membership. And there's more than one, folks. There's a lot more than one. This is where your tax dollars are going, and this is what's disclosed pursuant to the Arkansas FOIA. So the $5,000, the course sponsorship, here's what you get. You get top billing on promotional material, logo on promotional material, sponsorship given highest acknowledgement at course reception. Oh yeah, there's a fancy gala dinner, you know, the fish dinner and the apple pie. You're paying for that. You're paying for that. How do we know? Freedom of Information Act. This is the kind of what I call government corruption and cronyism that goes on every day that you wouldn't be aware of if it wasn't for the Freedom of Information Act. Right? Let's talk about some of the laws. By the way, Joey or anybody, if you all can hear me, just tell me what my time frame is. It's, I got 10 after. When am I on until? Anybody there?
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Yeah.
We've got about 2:15 or so.
Okay, so about another 5 minutes or so, right?
Yeah, you bet. You bet.
Yeah, okay.
If you need a little extra, that's fine. If you need.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I thought I was coming near the end, so I wanted to make sure that I was going to keep it in. So we'll be fine. I want to talk about 3 bills, but it won't take me very long. Now, I've been working with a bunch of legislators over the last 10 years on many different laws, including Freedom of Information Act. Happens to be that the 3 that I pulled, sponsored by Dan Sullivan, he's not the only person who's pro-transparency. I want to make that clear. There are many in the legislature who are pro-transparency. These bills wouldn't pass if it wasn't for them, right? One guy doesn't pass a bill. It takes 2 chambers to pass a bill. But Dan is at the vanguard amongst the select few. So one of the laws that we did was, it's another interesting story, I'll keep it short. An attorney by the name of Ben Motal made a FOIA request. No, excuse me, he went down to City Hall with his camera and he said, let me see a police report, I want to take a picture of it. They said, well, you can't take a picture of it. You can't take a picture of it. Why not? And they said, because you got to give us $10. I said, no, I got to give you $10 pursuant to your silly little local ordinance if I want you to make a copy. But pursuant to the FOIA, I'm allowed to copy any record I want. So let me copy it. It's cheaper than $10. And he also was making a point about it, because he sued over it. It cost him $175 just to file the suit. So he sues them. They said, no, you can't take a photograph. Why not? Because a photograph ain't a copy. And you're telling me that government bureaucrats are not going to try to manipulate the FOIA? Because a photograph ain't a copy. That was their legal argument. They ultimately lost that one in the Court of Appeals. And you know what the city said? City of Little Rock. We're going to take it to the Supreme Court. They're going to let it go. What I said earlier, dog with a bone. That's how these municipalities are. Dog with a bone. So we wrote a law. Guess what? We don't need to go to the Supreme Court anymore. We resolved it. Done. That's one law. Next law was, bear with me. Oh, I think Dan, like we talked about this, foundations. You know that the university and other public entities, the universities, excuse me, and other public entities do their fundraising through a charitable foundation. You know why? So that it's not subject to the FOIA. That's why. To avoid transparency. And then they tell you, we're not subject to the FOIA. Doing government work, sometimes on government property, with government employees, taking in donations, which is government money, because those donations are designated for the universities. No, says the universities, not subject to the Freedom of Information Act. We haven't passed that bill yet. Why? Universities have a lot of tentacles. We're going to pass that bill. With my help, hopefully, in the legislature. Next one. Catalyst theory, I talked about that one. We passed that one. Bipartisan, over the objections of the universities. And finally, Joey, I think you mentioned this already, the definition of meeting. We haven't passed it yet, but we've got to get some better laws out there, because I think the law is clear, but the courts don't. So we've got to make it clear that when governing bodies, people who are on governing bodies, get together and talk about government business, that's a meeting. I mean, sometimes it baffles the mind, but after these stories that I told you about, can't bring your camera in, can't use the catalyst theory, nothing amazes me anymore. So we're going to pass that one too. So these are the items that are on the agenda going forward. Some have been resolved. There are always more. Government always finds a way to get around transparency, and we will constantly be vigilant in watching them and enacting legislation to ensure that transparency persists. So anyway, I think that's my time. I thank you so very much for this kind invitation. If you would like more information about the FOIA, you can contact me directly at any time. I can be reached at 501-ATTY, like attorney, ATTY 804. 501-ATTY 804, or you can send me an email, rob@steinbuchforarkansas.com. My name is spelled STEINBUCH for FOR, Arkansas.com. rob@steinbuchforarkansas.com. Feel free to get in touch. Joey, thank you very much for having me on. This is the second time that I participated, and we've had it twice, and I hope to continue every year that we do this.
Well, hey, let's get. Does anyone have any questions for Robert?
I have a question for Robert.
We have, I think Mike Masterson has a question. Mike, let us get the microphone if we can.
Hi, Robert.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me at all?
I can.
Seems to be projecting, but that's
There you go.
There. Okay. Robert, earlier I made the comment that I really didn't understand, and you addressed this to a degree, why people seek public office and then elected by the public to do their business with trust and honor, and then decide that they're going to keep everything from the public. Why does that happen? Is it the corrupt nature of human kind?
It's a great question, Mike, and I'll try to answer that, because I do have some thoughts on it, but I'll tell you in advance, I'm not sure I can entirely answer. I think some people seek office with good motives, and then bad things happen.
Yeah.
I think some people seek office with bad motives, and we've seen some of that in this state notably, right? We've seen your paper has covered those events quite clearly. And then bad things inevitably happen. And then I think perhaps maybe even the biggest category is people seek office seeking to do good, but don't know exactly how things operate. And they try, and sometimes they fail. And they fail as a function of motive, or they fail as a function of knowledge. I'll give you an example. One of the big issues in my campaign is safety and security. Little Rock area has seen such an increase in crime, it's devastating. And I'm committed to the #1 issue of safety and security for my constituents. So someone asked me something, but wait, the police are state police. You're running for state office. What are you going to do? And I've heard elected officials make this claim as well, because they don't understand how it operates. The fact is, cities exist at the pleasure of the state, and state law determines whether or not we can put state police in cities. And we can, all we have to do is pass the law. So, we need people who have the fortitude to stick it out, to do right, even when there's pressure not to, when there's donors pressuring them to do otherwise, when the municipal league comes with bills drafted in hand telling them, this is good for your local folks. And it ain't good, it may be good for the local bureaucrats, but it ain't good for the constituents. They need to understand what's really going on. They need to have the fortitude to push back when the municipal league that writes big checks to candidates says, we want you to do this. I'm not owned by anybody. People can write me a check or not write me a check. It's not going to make a difference. They should write me a check if they want someone who's high-minded and not able to be bought in office. If they think they can buy me, don't write me a check. Same thing for individual donors.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sorry, go ahead. Didn't mean to interrupt. We've got another question for you.
Okay, yeah, just to sum up. So the point is, there are a lot of factors going on, and that's why we have to watch our elected officials the same way we watch our bureaucrats. Ultimately, the people are responsible for government, and the FOIA is a powerful tool to enforce that. The other one is elections. Go ahead, Joey.